off of that screen.
The camera's blocking you, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll tell you that.
You can see if my motion sees.
Go ahead and move it that way.
The camera?
No, the monitor.
I know, I was just kidding.
Yep.
Enough, at least.
Uh-huh. Perfect. That's actually perfect.
Oh.
Never forget the clap.
It was a harrowing time in our nation's history.
When we forgot claps.
Mm-hmm.
This Mulder. There he is. I'm a writer. Hola. ¿Cómo estás? Bien. ¿Y tú?
Rojo.
Biblioteca.
Does anyone know Zach? Where's Zach? when you
Rojo's
need him?
red.
I know, but I was thinking Rising.
Oh, yeah.
No
absolutely.
idea.
Zach's going to be like, oh, guys, it's something. Whatever he would say that it is.
That was a really, really
he
good
would
Zach
say
impression.
4 different things. Like in
Right,
Spain, it's
right,
actually
yeah.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of This Podcast Is Not For You.
It still is not.
It's still not.
One of these days.
One
It
of
might be
these
for you
days.
someday. Just, keep hoping, keep listening.
We don't really know. We've lost who it's for at this point.
Mhm.
We're gonna find
It's
it.
not us. That's
No.
for sure.
We'll find it eventually. Today we are doing. I believe this is our first book review.
Mm-mm.
No,
Dune.
we did Dune.
Much.
We did do Dune. We did do Dune, didn't we?
You guys know about much now.
We did Denise Dune, didn't we?
Didn't
We
we?
did do Denise Dune, didn't we?
Very good.
I stand corrected. This is our second.
Actually, we
Book.
just edit it out.
Okay, that's a good
This
point.
is our second book review, I think.
I think it's still in there.
Yeah.
This is our second book review.
I'm pretty
Maybe.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we have all read this different amounts and at different times. This I can just jump right off the bat and
the
say
series, you mean?
this book specifically.
Different amounts and different times. Okay, I got you
Yep.
now.
I will just say this right off the bat, Jacob, and I'll let you just take a minute and talk about it because Jake introduced this book to both of us and
Mhm.
has introduced it to basically everyone that I know has read it
Mhm.
in this area. It is one of Jake's favorite, if not, I believe his favorite book series of all time. Jake, can you briefly explain?
It's very true. I think.
You don't have to go into why or how or the details of the books. You can just just briefly talk about Red Rising, the series, and then kind of what drew you to it. How'd you hear about it? Blah, blah, blah.
The series itself is, I think it's great. I think Pierce is a very good. He comes up with great characters, and I think they're all nuanced. I think the best part about, our main character, at least in the first one, is he is flawed, and I think that's part of the reason that the people that I have talked about too, and listen to podcasts about it, and like talk to my buddies, just like friends that have also read it, relate to the characters because they are so nuanced, which is hard to do, I think, when you're writing a protagonist, or a set of protagonists even, and
Right.
the antagonists as well eventually. But yeah, I think the series is very, 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 very good. Probably is my favorite series, and the first book specifically, we chose it to read in book club. So I'm in a
Okay.
book club, and
Yeah.
and we chose to read it, and we do fiction every summer, just the summer of fiction, and it was. I think we read it 5 years ago, probably 4
Okay.
or 5 years ago. We read the first one, and then it was. I remember it was like we read the same book every month, and we meet at the very end of the month. And it was like the second week, and we all text each other, and we're like, "Are we ready to meet?" Because we all kind of read it already, And we're like, "Yeah, let's freaking talk about it," It was-
Yeah.
But what's interesting is someone in book club, Logan, had tried to read it the year before and stopped. He's like, this book sucks. I don't understand why people like it. And then the second time, he tried to read it. He finished it, and he's like, yeah, once you get to a certain point,
Yeah.
not going to spoil anything, obviously. He's like, yeah, it's just
Really takes
full
off.
throttle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's a great teaser. Red Rising is a 2014 dystopian science fiction novel by American author Pierce Brown. And it's a thrilling first entry into the Red Rising series or saga. So Red Rising is the first book, but it's also the name of the saga, which there are 6 books.
there's 5 that are currently out.
Okay.
An upcoming 6th.
Which I think I've got them later. We can discuss the titles later.
But
this review-
any Red Rising fans listening to this right now, he probably has announced the 6th book by the time this
Ooh.
is coming out. He's announcing it on the 22nd at San Diego
Oh.
Comic-Con.
Wow.
Oh, at Comic-Con? That's
It's
cool.
for sure coming, but he's announcing like title and date possibly.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
This review is specifically for the first book only. So, Red Rising, the book.
Go red.
Reds.
Come on, man, who are
Go
you?
yellow. Okay. Just a really brief synopsis so you can know kind of what the book is about. Darrow is our main character. Darrow has never seen the sky. He is a red, a member of a lowly mining caste in the color-coded society of the future.
On Mars.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything.
That's not a spoiler. It's like the premise of it, right?
Yeah. I don't think it is fine. I wrote it.
Okay.
Like his fellow Reds, he is willing to spend his life. Like his fellow Reds, he
Just
is
like the
willing
book,
to.
Red will hold up
That's right.
what needs to be
The,
done.
the rest of the words.
That's right.
I'm just gonna start it over. How about?
That's good. That's good.
Okay, perfect.
Editor.
Darrow, who's our main character, Darrow has never seen the sky. He is a red, a member of a lowly mining caste in the color-coded society of the future. Like his fellow Reds, he willingly spends his life digging underground, believing his sacrifice will make the surface livable for future generations. And right from the start, Red Rising is a story about class struggle intersecting with personal struggle. Darrow wanting a better life for his Red crew so he can earn a better life for his family. That's very general. I didn't want to put too many specifics in there.
Right.
But it is... So that kind of sets the stage for... We've got our main character. He's a worker. He's a laborer. There's some hints in there of what the story could be about.
Yeah.
In terms of what he believes he's doing versus what he may actually be doing.
Yep.
And then you've got the class. The class thing in itself, honestly, I think is interesting enough to even get into the book. Okay.
Yeah, I
So-
think just real quick for
Yeah.
people that haven't read it, or I don't know if anyone will listen to this that haven't read it, but the colors is a classification system. It's not like skin color or anything, right? It's just society's
Tribal.
way of
And it's like red, yellow, blue. It's not like, it has nothing to do with the actual.
Tons of
colors.
colors.
Yeah, and they all have jobs, and they kind of stick to their class, basically. Yeah.
Well, we can just go into a spoiler-free review section. Before we do that, we can talk about when we read them, or when we read this book, because this is the only one of the series that I've read. Wes has read the first 3.
I read the first one, listened to the audiobook of the next 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jake
Now, if
has...
that is interesting to anyone out there, I'm thinking about doing an episode about the difference between reading and listening. So drop a comment and subscribe.
I will say I'm not one of those people that says listening to the audiobook is reading the book.
Right.
True.
Those are
You
two different
differentiate it
actions.
for sure.
Yes.
Which I
I
appreciate.
know what
Yeah.
happens in the books now, but yeah.
Well, isn't it just about consuming the story?
And Jake, you've read these how many times? How many times have you gone through the series? Or I guess this book specifically.
This one specifically?
Mm-hmm.
3 times, I think. 3 times, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I have only read them. I've only read the first one once through, and then I listened to the next 2 books.
same. I finished it pretty recently.
You've only done. You haven't listened to the next 2 or anything?
No.
Yeah.
You got it. It's fine. We're doing it. Okay. Each one of us. General thoughts on Red Rising. Overall feelings. Good, bad, indifferent. How much was it good? How much was it bad? How much was it indifferent?
I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's the closest thing. Like, it's even I think it does a disservice. Like, when people compare it to like Game of Thrones or Hunger Games or Harry Potter, even, it's just such a disservice because there's so much. Like, it's pretty dark. In terms of like what happens. And now the way I will say I very much appreciate Pierce's writing style because he never really it doesn't get like Stephen King or George R.R. Martin in terms of description of what's happening. There's some dark, like very messed up stuff that happens in this book specifically, but it's always almost like he cuts away. Like you're reading it and you understand what's happening, and that's all that needs to be done is you need to understand like what these characters are doing to each other. Yeah. And he always sort of like cuts away from it, but the characters have to deal with what's happening, you know? And so that's what it's really adult. Like it doesn't ever, at times it doesn't feel YA at all.
Right.
And so that's what I really appreciated is it's like, if this scenario was true, right? What's happening, and this is the spoiler-free section, so I'm not going to say, but you guys will understand what I mean. If this was happening in real life and these kind of characters were interacting with each other, this is what would happen, you know, and it doesn't ever shy away from like the darkness of humanity, and it doesn't ever shy away from like the light of people too, you know, that go against that as well.
No, I agree. I think if there were a real class system like this that was this segregated and differentiated, this would absolutely happen. Yeah. Like people would treat each other like this, or it would be so stepladder, like, they're right above them, and then above them is that color. Yeah. It's very clear in the book that you get that, that feeling. And from that, humanity, people just derive a lot of their morals, a lot of the way they live based on their environment or their culture. Right. So each one of these has a culture. Yeah. So it's like very determinate of how they see good and evil, how they, like you said, interact with each other.
Even just down to how they talk. Like people talk high lingo, and it immediately people know that, oh, you're not supposed to be here or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and in terms of immediate quality of the book, that opens up a whole bunch of like really interesting ground for character development, but also character like going back to what you said about differentiating it between other things, other series like Harry Potter and Game of Thrones and Hunger Games. It gives you a different feel than those do because there are so many colors that it gives you the opportunity for a lot of different archetypes. Anyway.
Well, I think it's great.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Just a real general synopsis. I think the setting is cool. The story is cool. The characters, I mean, it's hard to just speak. Being pretty familiar with all of them for X amount of time that the whole series goes for. Sure. It's hard to speak specifically to this book, but the characters that you do like meet in this book or whatever, I think they're cool. They're funny. Yeah. They're bad A. They're fearful. They're like, I mean, it's really some cool people in there. Yeah. I mean, my rabbit's named after one of them.
True.
You know, so
yes, he is.
Yeah. Got my mug. Wes got me this mug.
Red Rising. Is it Christmas?
I believe it was.
I believe it
Stephanie
was.
got it.
Thanks, Steph. You got it for me for Christmas.
I think Stephanie got for you for Christmas. Yes.
Wes got this for me, and he can
That's
tell
almost that's worse than a cough.
you. He can tell you what he thinks about the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell us what you thought.
He's
Wes.
such a great friend that he will get you something if you like it, even if he doesn't.
So I have very mixed feelings about Red Rising, specifically this book. The series as a whole, I like a lot of things about. I think I had some different expectations going into this book as to what it was going to be.
Right.
All right. I think I
He's
had.
just thinking about that.
I was just thinking about it.
Thinking about the expectations I had.
I think I had some very. I think I had expectations going into this book, and the main plot line of the book is not really what I was expecting or kind of wanted from the world. Once I got into it and realized what the world was, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then it gets into the main chunk of the plot, and I was much less interested in that section. Now, subsequent books have gotten into the things that I like about the world and kind
Which
of
we can talk about in the spoiler section for sure.
But this one in particular, I was kind of disappointed by because I immediately started thinking of those series that you mentioned of Game of Thrones, Hunger Games in particular, Harry Potter a little bit. I agree with you that it's much more adult. It doesn't really feel like a young adult novel.
Yeah.
It's much more graphic. I think.
I honestly didn't even know it was YA.
Yeah.
Until he just said
I
that.
think only the first one or the first and second are classified like in most stores at least, because I generally just look for sci-fi first, and then it's always in like young adult or teen fiction even.
Right.
Which is,
Yeah.
So I think some of it was I went in with this expectation of what the world was going to be. I really liked the beginning of the book, like the first third or so. I was like, this is really cool and really interesting. But once that main plot
that
line,
was a good one, wasn't
once that main plot line started, I was kind of let down by it. I think he's a very good writer, and he's got really good characters, and the world is good. I like the world. I think a lot of it was just the expectations I had going into it. Excuse me.
It's his flu game.
Yep.
It's really struggling.
Yeah. I think one benefit of the perspective that he uses in the book is that feeling of it's dark and there's a lot of graphic stuff, but because it's from a character's point of view, the character almost looks away.
Right,
You
because
know.
he's removed from it if he's
And
not
he's
immediately.
desensitized to it. So
Yeah.
we're not feeling it in the same way like an outside observer might. But yeah, I think he's a good writer. I like the subsequent books that I've listened to. I think this first one, for me, fell too much into the young adult format and structure. And he does a good amount of stuff that breaks out of that. But I think I was just wanting something different. And I got it later.
Yeah.
But so I have very mixed feelings about the first one, the
Yeah.
first book in particular.
I thought taken as just a story, this one book is the only thing I've read. Beginning, middle, and end, I thought it was just really good. It's a really strong story of, again, I think the focus on Darrow as the main character and the journey that he goes on is a good one. I think that all the supporting characters are great too, but I think the thing that makes the book really good is the way Darrow interprets things. Like you said, I think the strength of the book is the first person point of view. I think that's what does differentiate it between it and some other series is it's very first person. Whereas some series are first person removed, where it's technically first person, but you still get some. I forget what is that the technical name in literature for first person.
It would be third person limited,
Oh, that's right.
third person omniscient.
Yeah.
This is actual first person. Things like Harry Potter are third person limited because you're
Yes.
essentially just in Harry's head.
Right.
It's really the only character that you have thought insight to. But yeah, this one's all
Strictly first person.
strictly first
First person reads like a diary, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It says I,
Yeah.
me.
Whereas like Darrow
Yeah.
did this.
He-
It says
yeah.
I.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a really a strength for the book. But again, generally, I would say it's really, really good. I think I agree. I think the first third of the book is the best,
Mhm.
just because there's a lot of heart going on.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that's necessary to drive the character through the whole story. So
I think
Yeah.
for me the first third is so like personal to that character
yeah,
that when it makes that change to the main chunk of the plot, that feels kind of removed and disconnected to me from all the stuff that happens at the beginning that I was like really into. It feels like a switch to something else a little bit. There's obviously things that tie in throughout, but I think that was another because I was so into that first section of the book
Yeah.
that it felt like, wait, I wasn't done with that stuff,
Mhm.
you know, and
Hmm.
it kind of becomes a different thing the last half. But
What was your reading experience like the first time you read it, Jake? You said you read it for book club, and basically like the environment. How long ago was it?
Yeah, I think it was
What have you read since then? That's been like, oh, that's kind of like Red Rising, or
yeah, I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and read it in like 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And I was just I remember I was like I used to be on the board for this camp that it's an organization that we do curriculum throughout the year, but it's a camp every summer for a week for kids with cancer or
Mhm.
they're recovering from cancer or whatever in the Ozarks. So that's our region. And I was reading it at camp, and I was like, just like staying up super late because I was like, a counselor or whatever, and then like just reading through it super fast, and then getting texts from my buds that were also reading it, which
Mhm.
is part of the reason why I love book club. It makes reading communal, which is
Yeah.
very hard to do.
right?
And and then we just all got together and we were like, holy crap, this is freaking crazy, right? Yeah. And then we talked about like, oh, who would you cast as, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Or who would you blah, blah, blah. And then since then I've read the only thing that comes to mind in terms of tone, not necessarily the story, but I reread Ender's Game, and I was like, this is the closest thing that I can feel like.
Yeah.
Because that is dark as well. I
Sure.
mean, it's 12-year-olds just like going at each other,
Right.
and Ender's Game's another first person, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, that's about it. My experience was it's strange. It was like like I said, it's the only series where I've like got merch for and like
Yeah.
or whatever. And
Were you like, first time you read it, you were like, this is, like, how quickly did it reach, this is one of the best
yeah, that's
books,
that's a
and then
great
once you got
question.
into it,
Yeah, because there's so many books that we read in book club where
Yeah,
we were all
right.
like, dude, that was so great.
Right.
Like Ready Player One, we all were like, dude,
Yeah,
this book is
right.
so great. Ready Player Two sucks. Armada, Ernest Cline's other book, sucks. So it's like, yeah, it's what sets
Yeah.
this one apart. That's a great question.
was it when you got to the second book?
yeah,
or
so when
okay.
we all finished the third one,
okay,
the first, second, and third, I was like, this series is
Yeah.
amazing. And
Right.
then he announced like a fourth one,
mm-hmm.
and we were all like pre-ordering it, and
Right.
autograph copy,
Yeah.
and like starting to like build the fandom,
Yeah.
really.
So it
And
got real after the third one, pretty
Yeah,
much.
because it's like, yeah, I don't know, like a lot of people can. I mean, I guess no, but there are a lot of really good one books
Sure.
out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a series called Wool. What's the Wool? WOOL. It's a really weird word to make clear. Wool. There's a series called the Wool.
Not wool,
Right.
not sheep's wool.
Series, and the first one's great, but the second one and the third one, I only read really because the first one was so good.
Yeah.
But so there's plenty of books like that
Sure.
where it's like, man,
The
and
Ender
then-
the Ender series.
agreed. If it wasn't,
Yeah.
and I really tried to, after I reread Ender's Game, I tried to get into, okay, I'm ready for the world. Like,
Yeah.
really let me.
Yeah.
And there's definitely some good stuff in that series. It's
so
just like
convoluted too,
it-
and it's like
there's parallel
Yeah.
series going. Yeah.
so.
It becomes
I
a
haven't
mess.
read the Dune books, but I think I would assume it's something similar because they're definitely not as big as the original book.
Right.
So
So
Yeah.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
say it's the first three, and then just his ability to continue the story when everyone was kind of like, "This is done,"
yeah,
and then in 4 and 5, I mean, he just keeps getting better. Like, I'm so glad that the story didn't end. Which, how many times does that happen? You know?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think it's all.
Because 3 definitely feels like it has an ending. You know. So
4 is a lot of people's favorite, and 5 is like one of the best written ones. I mean, they're so crazy.
Mhm.
Wish I could talk about them, but I can't.
Wes, your reading experience?
I read it very quickly.
Yeah, you did.
I read it.
I was so
think it was-
skeptical that you read it at all because
You watched me read it.
You want you to turn the pages.
yeah.
I read it. I believe it was Christmas weekend or Christmas week, up
Mhm.
at my
I mean,
parents'
we're
house.
talking
in-
48 hours and it was done, people.
And then he was like, "It wasn't that good."
That's why I was like.
We'll let you talk for yourself.
I read it that holiday weekend up at my parents' house in Illinois. I read it fast because I didn't have anything else to do. We were just kind of hanging out. And
That's
it's,
cool.
it's not super long, like, and
It's true.
so I read it very quickly. Just kind of relaxing up there. And I also wanted to read it relatively quickly because I knew I have a hard time reading stuff outside of an environment like that. Like, just at home.
Chipping away at something.
Yeah, that's much harder for me to do. And I wanted to get through this. So I just, like, kept barreling through. But, yeah, after reading that one, because I was kind of let down by it, I found the audiobooks just on YouTube of the next one and just started listening to the second one because I was like, do I want to invest the
Right.
time in it because I wasn't super like gung-ho about the first one.
And per usual, they get longer. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like not only
For
you know,
sure.
yeah.
But as I was listening to the second one, I was like, okay, this is more what I wanted from this world and this series. So I ended up just kind of still listening and then ended up listening to the third one as well. But yeah, that was my experience reading the first one. You were there and Steph was there, and I was kind of talking to you guys about it as I was reading it, and I was like, like there's stuff I like and there's stuff I'm kind of bored by, and so it was very mixed. Also because I also had high expectations because I know you like loved it.
Right.
So that I was like, I don't know if I had high expectations in terms of like, it didn't necessarily disappoint in terms of quality. Like it's very well written, and what he does well. I just felt like I didn't want him to do what he did.
Yeah.
If that
sort of
makes
like
sense.
a Green Knight situation, right? Where it's like we all walked away and we're like, that was good,
Yeah.
right? But I was like, that is not for me.
Right.
Dude, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I just had never considered. I mean, obviously, the same thing can happen for books, right? But it's like I'd never been
Yeah.
like, man, it was really well written,
And that's
but I didn't.
that's
you
the
know.
crazy thing about stories in general is like people's expectations going into them, people's expectation of what it is,
Yeah.
and then just what they like can have an impact on how they perceive a story, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. I think I read it over probably like 3 or 4 weeks, I would think. I don't know exactly. Typically, I would just go to Greenhouse on the weekend and read a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I was
That's
just going.
Crazy to me. I don't know how you read in public.
I usually put headphones in.
What I usually do is just open it up.
Yeah.
I would just
Dude,
get
when you've
so
got-
easily distracted.
When you've got enough noise going on, then you're good. If it's 2 voices yelling at each other, then yeah, I don't know how you're going to
That's
get anything
true.
done. We get the freaking roaster going. Not
Yeah.
usually on Saturday, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I read it over a month or so. Really enjoyed it. I read big chunks at a time, it felt like, because it was just basically one day a week that I was reading it. So that's only, I don't know how many days, not that many. But yeah, I think it was really enjoyable, especially once you get to like the second half. It really becomes a fast, like, gotta find out what happens next, for sure.
For me, it was, yeah. Yeah.
But this is the copy I read right here.
Right here.
Well, Wes
Same.
read this one too. This is Jake's copy. We both read that. It was really good, really enjoyable first experience. How have you enjoyed your multiple experiences? Briefly, is it getting
Man,
better every time?
For sure. I mean, I
Yeah.
will say, yeah, you just understand the characters more.
Right.
And then, like,
Especially with like the perspective of the other books,
Mhm.
looking back.
yeah, and then when people, like, come and go, you know, throughout the story, like, man, I really want to, like, appreciate them because before they leave or before they die or whatever, right? It's like, yeah. And then I will say, the fourth one, I absolutely hated
Mm-hmm.
the first time I read it. And the second time I went through it, I was like, this book is so good.
That's a drastic change.
It was I put it down the first time. I was like, sorry, Pierce, you lost me, you know?
Mhm.
And then Christian was like, it's pretty good. And Natty's like, how do you not like it? It's like my favorite one. And I was like,
Okay, I
"All
gotta
right,
try this
whatever,
again.
dude." And then when he announced the fifth one, I was like, I really got to finish it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, it was a slog. And then when I read the fifth one, I was like, I'm excited to read the fourth one again. And then when I reread the fourth one, I was like, dude, this book's so great.
I started listening to the fourth one and kind of burned out. And maybe it was because I had read the first one, listened to the 2 and 3 pretty close together. Maybe I just burned out on it.
Yeah.
But whenever I started listening to that fourth one, I was like, I don't know if I care now. But
I hear you,
I
dude.
still intend to
Same.
eventually finish it, you know.
But yeah, reading it again, it's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you get more themes,
Sure.
and less of the story. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
man, I'm really understanding like this. I mean, I remember where I was the first time I read like a specific like chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, it just like floored me. And now when you read it again, you're like, oh, I'm getting the overarching like,
Yeah.
you know, message and theme instead of just the story. But yeah.
Right. How well do you guys think it represents science fiction? Because to me, I don't get a huge science fiction vibe from it. Like it feels more historical or like.
Such a freaking weird blend, which is why I
Yeah.
think if they ever do a live action, which Pierce is supposed to announce something about that soon, it's gonna be terrible.
So it's. I mean,
gonna
it's
be so bad.
It's futuristic. It's multiple planets are mentioned. I mean, it's this universe. I mean, it's
Earth and
Earth
yeah, yeah,
and I don't know if the moon's mentioned at all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's futuristic, but it's also very old feeling.
Because of like, you know, razors
Yeah.
and armor
Right.
and like
Yeah.
honor and like all.
I think that's
it's like
why
this-
the Game of Thrones comparison is drawn a lot to it, because there is an element of like borderline medieval feeling. The class system is also
Yeah.
very much an older hierarchical concept. So, I think it represents sci-fi well. Sci-fi, when it's good, is saying something about people and humanity, I think. I think there's things I agree with him on in terms of his perspectives on human nature and stuff. And then there's other stuff that I feel like he drifts into the oppressors oppressed thing, commenting on that now, because that's a very typical mindset that a lot of people have right now. They divide society into oppressors and oppressed, haves, have-nots. And that's been talked about for a long time in science fiction, but so there's some stuff in it that I think I agree with in terms of his sci-fi theming, where he's drawing parallels within the structure of his world to ours. I think there's some stuff I think I might not agree with him on, probably in a political sense. Like, he feels a little bit more socialist at times in that anti any kind of structure thing. But I think he draws those comparisons well. Like, he is definitely saying things effectively, I think.
Right.
It's just whether or not you agree with what he's saying.
Yeah.
You know, I think he's absolutely right about some of the aspects of human nature and how we do divide each other like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah.
And maybe it does bend science fiction in a really good way, where it's not what you would think when you, immediately when you think of science fiction.
Yeah. And that might be why it gets classified as YA a lot, because typical sci-fi is like trade paperback, like 4x8, like terrible cover. You know it when you see it type of stuff, you know.
Right.
But we shouldn't even try to talk. We should just wait.
All right, Zach. Great. Cool. Let's quickly just give it a 1 to 10 rating. 1 being the worst, 10 being the best.
Obviously.
Wes, why don't you give us a star rating or a number rating?
6.5.
6.5 out of 10. I will give it a 8.
I'm going to give it an 8.5.
8.5, 8, and 6.5. There you have it. Across the board.
With an average star rating of
16.5
plus 6.
7 to 7.5.
23 divided by 3, 7.75.
Let's just say it's that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Those are general thoughts. Let's move on to
Thank
the
you for
spoiler
listening.
section, everybody. Spoilers, details, characters, plot, writing, all the good stuff. Let's discuss the plot first.
Yes, let's. I have a question.
Yeah.
When he gets out of the mine,
Yes.
you realize that Mars has been colonized already.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys see that coming?
I believe it had already been spoiled for me somehow.
It had.
Yeah.
I remember.
Someone told me, I think.
Yeah. Shame.
Yes, I already knew.
It's too bad.
Yep. It was still surprising. It was still, because you're at that point you're again first person so much that you're in his. You're all the content is through his eyes and all the writing is through his eyes. So it's like you still don't see it coming because he doesn't see it coming. Like, even though I knew technically it was going to happen.
Doesn't mean you know when.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you know how.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think because I had known about the class structure concept.
Yeah.
I kind of knew that something like that was going on. Maybe not that specifically, that what they were doing was kind of a lie.
Yeah.
or that they were being lied to.
I will say this: I don't think it was. Even if I hadn't known about it, I don't think it's like. I didn't feel like it was this crazy, mind-blowing moment.
Mm.
There's other ones that I think are better in the book later on. More character stuff that's mind-blowing. So that's just me personally. I didn't feel like it was nuts.
It didn't feel like a bit. Yeah, it didn't feel like a big plot twist reveal to me.
Yeah.
It
It
felt
felt
like the
shocking
launching
for the
point, you know?
character to realize that was the case. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
should we talk about the basic plot and like
Yeah.
what it is?
Yeah, so the book starts with Darrow. He is on Mars. And you've got him in his tight-knit community with his family, with his wife is a big character.
And the Reds are the lowest class of people.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Jake's nodding.
Yes.
Or the resident expert is
Mhm.
nodding. And they mine helium. So helium is a resource from Mars. It is used to, I believe, make fuel, right?
Terraforming as well, right?
Power ships and basically everything.
So they're an important group, but they're poor. And at the beginning of the book, all you see is Reds, except when some golds come into play.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of the overlords. They're the overseers of basically everyone. Gold is the superior class. And that happens pretty early. So you get some class stuff right off the
Mhm.
bat.
It's also a physical distinction too, which becomes
Yeah.
a part of it
Right.
in a little bit. But
They're genetically modified.
Mhm.
Yeah. Gold
So the book starts in the Red community. It's a lot of Io, who is Darrow's wife, and Darrow himself. She is basically the big incident or the inciting thing that starts the story off is she is killed,
publicly executed.
Basically trying to start a revolution is her goal. And that sends Darrow off. He is going to die essentially as well. He tries to anyway. But he's saved by a group of people called
What? Oh, the Sons of Ares.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I knew it was Ares. I couldn't remember if there was a
Oh, his buddy. His uncle.
You I wasn't paying attention.
I hate this book. What's going on?
What? So a revolutionary group that saves his life essentially and turns him into a gold. They change his physical appearance. They change the way he talks. They change
Mhm.
the way he thinks. Basically,
Now, question, Jake. You said the golds are genetically modified.
Yes.
I thought that the golds were physically superior just because of
bloodline.
centuries of bloodline. I didn't think that the natural golds, unlike Darrow,
Right.
were actually genetically modified in the same way that he was.
There is some. There's a section in I think the second or third one that goes a little bit into it, and it's about how that came about.
Oh, okay.
How that
I
happened.
must have missed that or forgot
and now
about
it's
it.
just, as I understand it,
People
natural.
do modifications all the time.
They
essentially.
do, but
But they
now
were originally modified,
Yes,
and now
yes.
it's been passed
Like,
down. Okay,
they're-
that's kind of what I
denser
thought.
bone structure,
Mhm.
like leaner muscles. You know, they stretch their bones because now they're huge, right?
Mhm.
So yeah,
And all of that happens to Darrow in the middle section of the book, probably still early,
Mhm.
pretty early. And then he is sent to infiltrate a certain, I don't know what you would call it, a certain,
The Institute.
yes, the Institute, but it is specifically for golds. So it is the way that golds are chosen for their leadership.
yes,
Correct. So he is,
Largely the children of the golds that are already in power.
Mhm.
yes. He is working for the Sons of Ares, but he's kind of a rogue. He's kind of on his own. At least that's what you gather from the character, the way it's written. And he is sent off to infiltrate and take a position of as high power as he possibly can. to later do some damage to the golds or change things is what he wants to do for the Reds. So, and that's where
a little dash of revenge in there too.
Bit of revenge, just a pinch. That's what the rest of the book takes place at the Institute. The Institute is on Mars, correct? And it is kind of a
yes. Every planet has its own, basically.
That's right.
So yeah,
and Mars is
it's sort of like the
big one.
It's not necessarily the cultural hub, but it's helium is gas. Helium is
people
oil.
That have
essentially.
won those institutes that are golds come to Mars, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that described?
Basically.
Okay.
Isn't Earth much more like kind of decrepit at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from that point on, it is all about interaction with other golds, how he's becoming
a leader.
and still being himself, but also
he's been doing that
Jake's
for about
very
10
excited.
minutes.
How he's seeing how he's going to plan his attack, and it's a lot of thinking back towards EO and like what he's doing and why he's doing it and all this stuff. Basically, describe the Institute for us.
It is
Like physically and the interactions that happen.
Yes, it's a school ground, basically, but not how you would normally think of a school ground, I guess.
In like a giant valley.
It is a
Yeah.
valley that is, I mean, I think I could have got the map, I guess, but it's, and there are like large castles. There are like structures that the students are divided based on their personalities and their traits. And each student is divided into a house. And then the house's job is essentially they set them free, very limited interaction from the professors and like the people in charge or whatever. And it's just to gather resources and
survive,
take over
yeah.
the rest of the
Yeah,
institute.
there's no like
basically.
educating going on by any
No,
professors.
it's
survival of the fittest.
the way that the way that Pierce describes it through some proctors at the school. He's like, we need to see who will build structure out of chaos in order to see who is going to come in my house and understudy for me, or you know.
Sure.
So that's sort of what it is. It's like, okay, if there was no structure and you had to make structure out of the resources you've been given, the resources other people have been given, how do you lead people? How do you maybe don't lead the ones that don't want to be led? How do you forcefully take over when eventually those people aren't going to want to serve you anymore? And so
It becomes a facsimile for what the golds will face in
right.
the real world.
Yes.
Yep. And there's even a hierarchy that's developed between the golds because like there's a class structure almost.
Pixie.
That's made at the Institute, even though all of them are golds.
Yeah.
None of them are golds really when they're there. So
It's
characters,
crazy, man. It's crazy.
let's get into the characters. Let's just talk about Darrow first.
I think the best thing about the book is that eventually Darrow realizes that he was a naive child. I think that's the best thing about the book because, I mean, that's why I got that painting commissioned, because it's like Darrow thought in his limited experience and emotional capacity at the time that the best way to live his life is to shamelessly say, I don't care what it does to me, I'm going to live for you. I love you. And it's just like vapid almost.
Yeah.
And she literally tells him, your job is to live for more than that. Like,
Right.
it's like we have a job to do. We have to do something that's bigger than ourselves, than
For
just
sure.
living for our little hut down here when we know that we're being deceived.
Yeah.
For the generations that will come after us. Eventually he has to come to accept that, or the rest of the books wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Which is like freaking awesome.
Right. Yeah. I mean, talk about development or journey of a character in 200 pages. I don't know. It's a little over 200 pages, right?
I think it's 347.
Oh, wow. It's longer than I thought it was. 370. Okay.
Oh. 400 on the dot. Never going to forget that, obviously. It's 400.
Double what I said.
Excuse me.
Yeah, there's a lot of development that happens just in this book with him. More so than others, just because like his entire physical appearance is transformed. I
Yeah.
mean, he's like, there's the physical transformation that accompanies the emotional and spiritual one that would normally happen in other books. So there's a lot of change that happens with Darrow. What did you think of Darrow, Wes?
Just the first book.
Good character,
Yeah, I think
good main character. Like,
like a lot of main characters, he is a more active main character than a lot of other similar books. Some books like Harry Potter or I don't really know about Hunger Games because I haven't read it, but Ender's Game, some of the things that those books can fall into is things happening to the main character as opposed to them being an active
Catalyst for
participant in what's going on. They're just like they're the audience surrogate into the world. So they're kind of generic, but Darrow isn't really. I think I agree. I think the journey he goes through is much more complex than you would, especially in later novels. It's not a simple cut and dry. Darrow is 100% a good person.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Like not even really close to that. Like
Yeah.
he does terrible things in all of the books. Like
yeah,
and I think it pushes the reader to go, do I want him to succeed? Like,
Yeah.
is he right? Is he wrong? And obviously, if we ever do things talking about the later books, we can talk more about that. But I think Pierce balances that very interestingly. Is like, it's not a pure like good guys versus bad guys thing. Now there are some just pure evil
Right.
characters, and yes, you identify more with the protagonists, but the protagonists are also not great. And I think that's one thing he gets right about human nature is like Darrow is not perfect,
Yeah.
and he's not even really trying to make him seem like he's perfect.
Yeah.
And I don't think Pierce would say you're supposed to root for every single thing he does.
Yeah. Right.
There's not really any characters that are. Maybe Mustang is sort of close to that. Even Io, who's this like kind of
Right.
deified character, you find out later is like, oh, she did something kind of terrible in the way she died. You
Yeah.
know, and so I think he gets that right with those characters. Is like, there's not really any purely good ones.
Yeah.
And I think that makes Darrow a pretty interesting protagonist.
we could just talk about favorite characters right now. Just from this novel, favorite characters. Let's just say favorite minor character. Obviously, I guess I don't know what we would consider main characters. First of all, there's a lot of characters in this book. I think that needs to be said. There's a lot of characters.
I don't think there's a compendium at the beginning of this one. At the books after this one, there's a compendium, and it's like it gives you basically like color, name, house, like
Yeah.
because there are so
Yeah,
many.
there's a lot
and,
of characters.
Yeah.
For me, I think, and I'm blanking on his name.
I'm also blanking on my favorite as well. And it's literally only because there's so many.
Severo. Severo
Yeah,
is
no.
one of my favorites. Just because he is. I love that you find out who he's related to later on. That's great. It's a great addition. He's mysterious. Any, like, Sirius Black or any, like, mysterious character like that is always going to feel like the coolest one. Like,
Yeah.
even though to the world he's not the coolest one,
Right.
it seems like that's always the case.
But that's why he's cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think Severo's awesome.
I like Fitchner a lot.
Fitchner is one of the proctors, right?
He's the proctor of House Mars, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just liked that. I like that character throughout the series.
Mhm.
And that's probably feeding into a little bit in this one, but I think it's it's like the Dumbledore character almost, but not. I don't know. It does something interesting with the mentor role,
right.
sort of, you know. And there's a couple characters like that in this that kind of serve as like the
Yeah.
mentor, but yeah.
Jake, favorite character from this book?
I mean, I would probably pick Darrow.
Yeah.
So freaking bad, eh? I mean, when he gets whipped, I mean, that's my favorite
Scene.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that is, and just how like earth shattering it is for like the other characters that have no idea that people like this exist. They're so far removed from the people that they're supposed to be like shepherding,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, and that. So just moments like that where it's like,
Yeah. Being in his mind is pretty cool.
yeah, and he's
Yeah.
doing stuff that he doesn't necessarily want to be doing.
Sure.
But it's like, this is what needs to be done, which is just
Yeah.
like, so I'd probably pick him. If I didn't, Cassius, Pax, Severo,
Mhm.
I mean, they're all, I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. There's a lot of different.
And that's the thing about like, you know, I mean, even reading it for the first time, I remember thinking, okay, great. I'm going to be one of them, and then I'm going to like them. And then what do I do with this? It's like,
Yeah.
you know that that's going to happen.
Sure.
But it's like, man, the characters are so like cool
Mhm.
that you don't care because you're like, I like him too. Like,
yeah. The thing
you
that I
know?
gathered from it is like all of them are putting on a show in some way. The intriguing part
for
to me
sure in
was
this one too, right? I
the
mean,
intriguing
nature
part
of
to me
that.
was like, when are we going to get to the core of
yeah,
who they are?
yeah,
Because you do that for a few. That's when they become really interesting, and then you see why they were putting on a show, or like
yeah,
who they were trying to be, who their family is. Like
Mhm.
all of that stuff is super. That's the cool part to me about his characters in this book, is that they are all, including Darrow, but everyone, even though the golds that were natural born, are all trying to just be. You've got an extra layer of character because you've got the fake one that everyone sees, and then you've got the real one that you get to a few,
yeah,
and that's
I
interesting.
think too, it illustrates that if all of the reds were golds, they would be the same.
Yeah.
You know, like if the golds were all reds, they would be the same. And I think that's part of the point that he's getting to, is that they're all people.
Sure.
Like you can divide up people as much as you want.
Give them abilities,
But-
give them power.
They're still going to be people.
yeah,
And
It's-
do the things that are like, I mean, look at Darrow. Like you put him in the situation with the golds, he starts being a gold.
right.
Yeah.
And-
right.
Same with Tactus.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
So I think that's one point he's trying to illustrate by making all the gold sympathetic too, just as much as they are doing terrible things. I mean, the Reds aren't all like kumbaya getting
Right.
along. They're
Yeah.
fighting with each other and hating on each other, and they've divided into little factions and
Mhm.
stuff. I don't think, and I think that's something he does handle pretty well in subsequent novels. It's not clear cut good and evil. It's dealing with the complexities of a society,
yeah,
as opposed to, oh, aren't the Reds just all these perfect
yeah,
people that are just so victimized? And that feels a little bit more like that in this one
Mhm.
specifically, but that's how Darrow thinks about it too. So
Yeah.
but yeah,
Talk more about we'll go into our favorite scene now, or moments. Talk more in depth about the whipping scene, why it's your favorite.
yeah. So
Set it up a little bit.
So Darrow's like struggling with building a functioning hierarchy or like house at this at the institute, and And there's kind of, I mean, they're all these are alphas. Like
Yeah.
everyone here is like the best of the best that they think they should lead. They're the ones that should be, and they know whoever comes out on top is going to get the apprenticeship for the
Yeah.
arch governor or whatever,
Yeah.
and so he's struggling with like what to do in certain situations. And so he finds out that there's certain members of his house that are like raping other students.
Yep.
And he like gets them all into the courtyard, and it's like I can just see it in my head.
Yeah.
It's like so
Very
epic.
visual,
and
yeah.
he's like, this will not stand in my house. Like this is going to be the punishments, 50 lashes, and he gets Pax, the biggest student there, to lash. With 50 whips on the back. I think it's Tactus, right? Or no, it's Titus.
That's right.
It's Titus. And so Pax, huge guy. Every time I think of Pax, I think of like Hercules, like the
I
cartoon,
think I always think of what's his name, Thanos from
Avengers.
the Avengers. Yeah,
I can
that's
see
what
that.
I think of
yeah.
Pax. Yeah,
But yeah,
not
and
purple,
so,
obviously, but
yeah, gold. But yeah, he Pax whips Titus 50 times, and then Daro's like, okay. And then he like takes his shirt off and like kneels in front of Pax, and he's like, whip me 50 times. And they're like, all of the golds are like, who have no idea, no like self-sacrifice or like, I will do this for you, right? It's almost like a Christ head like moment, and you're just like, I mean, I remember it was a passenger seat of the band van. I was just like floored.
Yeah.
And I just like shut the book at the end of the chapter. I was like, holy crap.
yeah,
And it was
it's a
like,
great moment.
because he's like, anything that you do that harms this house will harm every single one of you. And he's like, I would do this for anyone here.
Yeah.
And they're all just like, and they don't know what it's like to lead someone that they might want to follow,
Right,
which is just,
it's all mandatory.
yeah, I mean, that is so cool. And the way that he just like sets up the slave system, like he frees them when they've never.
And you really get a strong feeling the proctors are waiting for someone to do something like that. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of setup up until that point of like, who's going to do something different? 'Cause
Yeah.
we've seen the way that Golds lead, and they think they're supposed to lead. It's just
He
alpha
goes the same
mentality,
way
like you
every
said.
time. Yeah.
It's like, I beat you in this. I'm the strongest until someone beats me.
Yeah.
But he sets up a totally different paradigm
Yeah.
with that scene. Yeah, it's a really good scene. Wes, what was kind of your favorite moments?
My favorite moment is whenever he sees the real world for the first time, and he's seeing the streets with the different paths and the different colors doing their jobs. That's really what I wanted, was that world of like exploring a sci-fi world and the class structure. The way the book kind of is, it jumps over all the other colors just to gold, so you don't really see anything in the middle. And I felt like I wanted a climbing of the hierarchy, like before just going straight to the best of the best group. But that scene gave me that feeling of like, this world is cool. There's a billion interesting things to navigate, you know. And you get a little bit of that when he's being transformed. You get a little bit of like the underbelly of this society, the different colors and how they interact with each other. You get that during that little section of the book. So that was kind of my favorite section, because that's what I was really wanting.
Yeah. To me, it's the furnace. That's what you call
That
yours.
is what I call it. Yeah, the passage.
The passage,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Got the furnace on my
That's
brain.
cool.
My favorite's the furnace. Basically, the scene where it's basically initiation into the Institute, where the characters are forced to battle one other character to the death. So everyone's been drafted at this point, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Or are they drafted after?
No. Oh, you mean in the houses?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they haven't. That hasn't
After.
yet, sorry.
So how many? I'm trying to remember how many golds are selected before the draft for this scenario.
100.
100, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then it's narrowed down to 50 because all the characters have to. And then later on, you find out. So you only know who Darrow has to face initially,
Poor Julian.
which is Julian, who is the brother of kind of his buddy up until a certain point, Cassius. And that has some interesting repercussions later on. But you only assume who others had to face, and then you see the final 50. But that was a crazy moment to me because I didn't know that was going to happen. That was a total surprise to me. And that was the biggest mind-blowing section,
like,
I thought.
Brutal moment. Too.
Yeah.
And there's
Like,
no weapons in there.
No,
I mean, it's
they're
just
naked.
they're naked.
Right.
It's a stone room,
And he doesn't want to do it.
And he met Julian on the tram in.
Yeah.
And Julian's like a kind-hearted, like
yeah, right.
he compares them to like Severo and Cassius. He's looking around, seeing all these other golds, and Julian's just like a
Yeah.
very kind person.
Yeah.
But then you find out that it's like, oh, this was all orchestrated, right? It's
Sure.
like we put the weakest with the strongest because they're supposed to kill the weakest, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, that's freaking crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
That changes the tone of the book. That scene, I think, there's a big change that happens right there.
It's like the, what's the character that dies at the end of Goblet of Fire?
Cedric.
Harry.
Cedric Diggory. Yeah, that's when Harry dies at the end of the 4th Harry Potter book.
Dude.
Yeah,
He's
it's
a
that,
Horcrux.
It's
You
that
know
kind
that,
of moment when Cedric dies at the end of Goblet of
Yeah.
Fire. You feel a shift.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Some of us liked it, and some of us didn't.
we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's talk about Pierce a little bit.
We
in
are
his
at
writing.
an hour and 6 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, it'll
Okay.
get cut down. Don't you worry. Let's talk briefly about Pierce Brown and his writing style. What do we like? What we don't like? Has he written anything else? I don't even know, really. Okay, no, Jake says. Let's just talk about this book specifically. How you already mentioned it was really well written, quality-wise. What do we like? What do we not like, Jake?
After reading so much fiction, like since the first time I read this, I mean, like, you know, I read at least, just because of book club, I read at least 12 books a year. So for the last 4 or 5 years since I read it, I've read like 60 books and extra fiction. So, I've read a lot of fiction since then, and it's so easy to picture what's happening in Pierce's books. Whereas sometimes it's not,
Right.
It's like, man, there's like a cliff here, and then he's got his back up against the wall, and he's climbing with his legs out. It's like there's so much like mental, like, but with Pierce, like, especially when it's so action heavy at times, that's imperative. Like, if you don't, I mean, if you've probably read it, like, where I don't comprehend, just get to he stabs him. Okay. And it's just not fun, but there are moments where, like, the whipping scene or like the passage where you can see it's just so vivid in my mind. So
He's not overly flowery in his language. He doesn't bury what's happening in.
And he does
unnecessary
occasionally
prose.
that truncated thing where it's like short of breath, can't
Fragments.
can't control, or whatever. And that doesn't bug me either because it's so first person,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'd say he's very clear about what's happening.
Yeah.
Visual.
I agree. Super engaging. He's
The freaking vernacular he crafted, like, for this world. Like, just the way, the terms that other people use and stuff.
Yeah.
It's cool.
He's a hard writer. Like, the language is piercing.
It's Browning.
What I mean by that is, like, it's almost brutal the way he writes. Like, it's very to the point, but it's not short and curt. It's like I think the reason for that too, and what it feels like, is that's how Darrow thinks a lot of the time. Is it's very I don't know how to describe it. Not matter of fact, but
Succinct
and offensive almost sometimes. And I think that's an interesting read. Like, I don't know if you guys can understand what I'm trying to say. I don't know if you gathered that at all, but from reading it.
Yeah. For me, I think his strength is the world building, like the society, the class structure, the nature of each group. I think that's his strong point in it, as well as characters. For me, I think his weak point as a writer, and I definitely got this more as the books went on too, but I got it definitely in the first one, is his pacing is like relentless.
Yeah.
And sometimes
That's
it
true.
feels like he's doing the big epic thing in every single scene.
Yeah.
So sometimes it feels like I don't have any contrast to the big epic thing. It's
I
just
get
like we're
that.
going from the big scene with Pax to like the final battle. Like it's just boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. And it can be kind of like almost exhausting. And I think some of that can be effective. I think he writes action very well, and I think he knows it. And he writes the big epic dramatic thing very well. I think he can also write smaller character moments well, but I just don't think he does as much in this. You have the scene with him and EO talking, but even that's more epic in scope. What they're talking about is big picture stuff.
You
Yeah.
can tell that she's hinting towards something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't really get a ton of like small character things that are much more like relatable or simple, I guess,
Yeah.
because he's doing the big picture story.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a smallish weak point in his writing. I think sometimes it can be like getting like beat up a little bit while you're reading it, and sometimes that's what you're going for.
Yeah.
You know, you're wanting to be relentless, but I think at the end of 3 books I was like tired because especially in the later 2 books it's like relentless, it feels like. So I think that would be really his only weak point. Besides, I kind of disagree with his dialogue. I think some of the class dialogue differences is the bloody thing with the Reds is just it doesn't feel realistic to me. It feels like a sci-fi dialogue a little bit more than other science fiction stuff that I've read. Excuse me. So I think that it was such a small point of the book that it didn't bother me that much. I got the point of what he's going for, in that there's differences between the classes in terms of how they speak.
Right.
I just felt like it didn't necessarily feel the most
Original.
original or natural.
It is. I mean, most of it is putting just 2 words together.
Yeah.
Which I think he's probably going for simplicity, I would assume, in terms of like what would really happen.
Right. I
Or,
mean, these are uneducated,
Right.
for the most part.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Red,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and he says he based the Reds off of the Irish, like the potato farmers in Ireland, and I think you get a little bit of that.
Is that like a burn or is that like cool? You know what I mean?
Well, they were impoverished and
Right.
peasants essentially at the time that he's basing them on, like the potato famine kind of
I
era.
guess it is historical, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
But he does a little bit of that with the accent that they're using, and I think that's all you need. I don't think you need the specific words. You know, I feel like if you separate them by accent and dialect in terms of how they're
But
phrasing
I think those are
sentences,
Here's the
placed
thing: we
there.
don't get that in reading.
you can. It comes across, I think, a little bit when reading the Reds dialogue that they speak differently, even without the specific words that they're using.
I think a reason for the specific words though are, at least for me when I was reading it, the tension of when could Darrow slip up in the way he's talking, because
Sure.
if when you put the words in there, he's you know, undercover or however you want to describe it.
They definitely serve a function
Yeah.
in the story.
So I
He
think
does slip up.
it's overused. I think that's the main problem.
Yeah.
It's used a lot. So I think that's
Right.
probably the only downside I would say from his writing, and this is not his style or anything, it's just the way I think there's probably just a few too many characters, or it can feel like
There's a lot of similarly named characters too.
it's hard. It was hard for me to remember which character this is that
Like-
I'm reading about right now.
Right now,
a
Titus and
few times.
Tactus, can't remember the difference between them.
Just a few times. But I think that's something that will benefit from multiple reads, and
Farther
if
in
I
the
had to
book.
pick a downside, I would say there's a lot of characters.
Yeah.
But
There is definitely.
cool. Do you have any? Did you already talk about Pierce? His writing style?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, would you recommend Red Rising? Yay or nay? Westlands.
Yes. I fully admit
6.5 is worth your time.
I fully admit that going into it, part of a reason I didn't like it as much was what I was expecting.
Mm.
And that's not necessarily Pierce Brown's fault. I don't know that I ever really articulated it. It's the Institute section of the book,
Mm.
the Academy feel that
How pissed were you when book
lost
2
me.
starts like that?
Huh?
How pissed were you when book 2 starts like that?
Yeah, I was a little.
You're like, oh, I'm out of school again.
Yeah, I was a little worried.
Yeah.
But that was the section where I was like, oh, we're doing the Hunger Games Harry Potter thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was so much uniqueness going on in the first section. I was like, oh, now it's a young adult novel.
Yeah.
No, and he did stuff that was different,
Right.
and it definitely got bigger,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
You would
that was-
recommend it.
I would recommend it. It's well written. That was the section that disappointed me.
Yeah.
Now, some people are not going to be disappointed by that section at all, obviously.
Yeah.
Also, the recommendation, there's weight on the recommendation of, is it worth getting through with the benefit of the other books too?
The other books pay off what I wanted from this.
Yeah.
It gets more into the world outside of the Institute, because that's what I
yeah.
wanted to see.
That's what I was going to say is the scope when you read it is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets very narrow.
Yeah.
And then it
Darrow.
blows up. It's very narrow.
Yeah.
And then it blows up again. You know
I feel
what
like I wanted it to stay sort of narrow and then
Right. Yeah.
expand, because it felt like kind of a false start to go, here's the world with all of these colors, and there's like the image of the paths on the sidewalk where certain colors can walk and others can't,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone doing their jobs and like not interacting with each, like that. I was like super into it, and then all that went away
Right.
again and went back to one color and one space, and I was like, oh. But he pays it off well in the following books. You get to know way more colors, way more characters.
Why they're fighting
yeah.
against that whole system gives it weight.
And you get into more of the complexity of the world and the morality of the class structure.
Right.
It's like not all the Golds are terrible, horrible people, and some are. There are some downsides to a hierarchical society, but there are some upsides too. At the same time, it's not
Yeah.
absolute chaos.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
he gets into some of that stuff, which is very interesting.
Dude,
Cool.
If I'm just saying, like, book 4 and 5 are insane. Would you recommend this?
I would recommend this book. I would recommend
8 is worth your time.
absolutely, with room to go up. I think this one, would benefit from multiple reads. I think it'd probably climb a little bit
I mean, look, he's
For
just
me,
begging you.
from
Please
from
read.
8.
Please read Morningstar.
From 8, if I read this one more, but also read the other books. So I'm excited to read the other 2 from this run, and I'm excited to read all of them. So I would definitely recommend
I
Red
am
Rising.
very excited.
Jake, I can answer for Jake. He absolutely would, and
he does.
has
And
Many
has,
times.
yes.
recommended
Yes.
Red Rising.
And
That's
that,
why
I will
we're doing an
say,
episode.
in defense of the book, in defense of the genre, Wes is the only person who has had mixed feelings about this book that I've recommended it to. Seriously, I mean,
He's got a good
everyone
track
that-
record.
So, and that's not to say that his points are certainly justified, especially if he was wanting something more specific. But it is, I would absolutely recommend it. And that's the thing is like, man, it's just like it just keeps on giving if you love like what's happening in here. So.
And the other 2 books are really good.
Yeah, we
Like,
can. I'll just name the books. So Red Rising is 2014. Golden Sun is second. It's in 2015. followed by Morningstar in 2016, Iron Gold in 2018, Dark Age in 2019, and then
And we have been absolutely starving for the 6th book for 3 years.
It's still alleged. I think that this is the title
It
at
is-
this point.
It's what everyone thinks will be the title. But by the time you hear this,
Could be, could not be.
yeah.
Lightbringer in 2022. This year, it's coming out.
And
So
he has said, I will say, we can end with this. There's 2 deer out there. We can end with this.
Let's end with that.
He has said the names of the books are in the previous one. And I was reading, I just got done with Dark Age like a couple weeks ago. And Lightbringer is,
oh boy,
it is said.
Okay.
A
Is that
few
why people
times.
think that's what it is?
Probably.
I think it's a cool
Yeah.
title.
I
think Lightbringer's
absolutely
cool.
hated it, but then
I
when I
think
read
it's
it
cool.
in context, I was like, but the thing is, each one is 2 words. So I think if it is Lightbringer, it will be Lightbringer.
Uh huh.
I think that's what will happen because I don't think he would break from the 2-word, pattern at this
Maybe.
point. But anyway, so yes,
Light-
he's going to announce it
yeah.
on the freaking 22nd, and I am so stoked. And if he does a freaking signing anywhere close, me and the boys are going. You guys are absolutely welcome. But oh my gosh, I'm so psyched.
I'll personally criticize the last half of the first book to his face.
Right in his right in
I'd
his
be-
face.
I mean,
He'll probably fight
Hey.
you, dude.
Why?
What's so great is like I bought a publisher's copy for Natty for Christmas. It's
Mhm.
like it wasn't out yet, and they printed these and like it ends and there's like a little blurb like, thanks for reading my book. If you like it, let me know on Twitter and blah, I mean from Pierce. And it's so funny to read now because he's just like, oh, thanks for reading, guys.
He's
If you-"
hustling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so great. And I was like, Natty, you have to bring that and show it to him. Like that'll be so funny. Anyway, it's gonna be
Anyway, Red Rising.
Red Rising.
It's a book series. Check it out.
It's a board game too from
It's a board
Stonemaier
game.
Games.
Which we
Not
have
movies
reviewed.
yet. No movies yet. So that'll be interesting if that gets sold. You know it's going to at some point.
I think it's
There's
already
money
been
to be
sold,
made.
hasn't it? I'm
Someone
sure-
is making something.
Yeah, I'm
That's
sure
what
somebody
we know.
already has the
Oh,
rights.
really? Oh, boy.
I know it's gonna be terrible. It's gonna
You
be
don't have
so
to watch
bad.
it. You don't have to watch it.
I think I have to watch it once.
Okay. This has been This Podcast Is Not For You. My name is Peyton.
My name is Wes.
My name is Daro.
Nice. See you later, Mustang.